once again. Thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist to the chair of BLM Tokyo. Looks like you got a sandwich there in the morning. What's going
on? Coming off a refugee status, actually. Japan's going through a typhoon in this area. It's been pretty crazy, and so yesterday we got warnings on our phones, because you get government alerts from the phone through your phone, telling people this was a level 5, which is the max, and to seek shelter to protect your life.
Wow.
And so they were concerned with the rivers overflowing, and this whole area has a lot of rivers, and they were up pretty high. And so my apartment is not too far from the major river that was kind of feeds the others. And so that was in danger of flooding and overflowing and going into the streets. And so I went to a friend's place, and their apartment's also near one of the rivers. And that river was almost up to street level and almost up to the bridge that crosses it. And so we spent probably about 5 or 6 hours on the second floor of a department store parking lot. Everyone kind of evacuated to that location because that was the highest point in the area. So
that sounds pretty intense. So you're out there fighting for your life. I was going to talk about going to the feast in Howard Beach. I mean, I don't know.
It was pretty crazy. Thankfully, yeah, we were there. We didn't get back into the house till probably about after midnight, 12:30, almost 1. Some people went ahead and stayed all night. And this morning the water has subsided, so that's good. I think there's still more rain on the way, but I don't know if it's going to be as strong. I think we're being passed by the typhoon at this point. What I think is really awesome is that that department store we went to, and we weren't the only ones with the idea, because there were other people there all parked in the parking lot and sitting in their cars trying to wait it out. And the department store generally closes at 11 o'clock at night, and you have to pay for the parking, right? So initially we went in, and you get 2 hours free. So we went in 2 hours and then went back out, came back in. And so when it came time to closing, the question was what was going to happen then. The department store, to their credit, took the poles off of the parking entrances and turned off the machines to allow people to come in for free and to stay all night, to be able to leave and go as they pleased. And even left a security guard at the department store so people could come in and use the bathroom if they were there all night.
Did they make any kind of announcement to post any signs saying that, or did you just hope that was going to be the case? And
not that I know of, but what happened was we were in the parking lot. Before closing, couple of the employees walked around the parking lot to the different cars of people and asked them what their plans were, what they were thinking about doing. And so most people told them that the idea was that they were going to hang out here as long as possible to see what was going to happen. And so the answer was mainly like, if they were allowed to stay, they would stay, but and whatnot. So like I said, credit to that department store,
right?
Because not a lot of places would have done that, and it was very helpful for a lot of people going through crisis. So I think that was great. And I don't even know if they're going to get recognized for it. I think they probably should at least get a mention in a news story or something. But
right,
yeah,
maybe you can contact your local paper and let them know about it.
Yeah, you know what? It might be a good idea, and even just. I don't know. I was thinking, immediate thought was to just write a thank you letter and just leave it with the management of the store. Just, because I think that's something that's needed more often, if possible. Now, of course, not everyone's able to do something like that. Right. And there are concerns, like if something happens, people are still on their property and no one's around. I get all that. But, I thought that was a really good gesture.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to them.
Yeah.
And shout out to everyone who was at the feast in Howard Beach. So I feel guilty now enjoying, right? The
Nah,
fun.
man, enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Typhoon over there. But the word of the week is RICO, right?
Right.
To use it in a sentence, I had the Zeppelis at the Howard Beach feast, and they were quite RICO.
They were quite Rico, yeah. I grew up actually with a friend named Rico.
Was he suave?
And he wasn't quite suave.
Oh.
But he was doing his Rico thing.
There you go. Was he rich?
No, I don't think so. He was his family was also military, just like ours. So
All right. So he wasn't rich. He wasn't smooth. Was he clean shaven at least?
well, I mean, we were sixth grade, so I mean everyone's kind of clean shaven.
Okay.
Or actually not clean shaven. Everyone's like hairless at that point.
So he was, in some sense, he was suave.
Right.
All right. Well, on a more serious note, I wanted to acknowledge Robert Kaskel, who passed away, the owner of Thai Rock, because he was very, very accommodating to us when we
Yes.
first started getting into Rockaway and getting involved in the community of Rockaway. He was actually one of the first people who we met and really embraced us, I would say, with open arms, if you recall back in 2011.
Yeah. Even though he didn't share the political affiliation you were coming from,
Right.
he was very open-minded. And from what I remember, is the position he came from is if it was going to help Rockaway, it didn't matter who it came from.
Yes. Yes. And over the years, I think he maintained that energy, always very warm and always embraced what I was trying to do to help the community, even though he might have been on the other side of the aisle. That didn't stop him from reaching out and offering a hand and just being helpful any way he could help, because he saw, I think, that I was coming from a good place and he wanted to facilitate those efforts. And
Yeah.
never forget that, because when you're coming into a new area, that was a redistricting year. All of a sudden, Rockaway was going to be part of the district, right? We were kind of entering uncharted territory. That could be a little scary, but I think he made it a little less scary because of how welcoming he was.
Yeah. And the food was good.
Yeah, absolutely. The Thai iced tea is phenomenal there, as well as the mango salad. I love that mango salad. It's spicy.
Yeah, that was your thing.
Yeah. So definitely shout out to him. Condolences to his family.
Absolutely.
Hopefully Thai Rock will be able to stay running and thriving. I know now it's a very difficult time. It would be nice to do something, maybe an event there or something to support that business if they plan to keep it going.
Right.
But also, Rockaway Jet Ski, we can't forget. Shout out to Glenn DeResto, who started it with Robert. But at the time, they had this idea to bring jet skis to the business because it's right on Jamaica Bay there, right by the bridge.
Right.
They had this great side business where you can not only get some Thai food out there, but you can go to the back, get on a jet ski, and explore New York City. There were all kinds of cool trips that they chartered from the back of Thai Rock. One I never got a chance to do was from Rockaway to Atlantic City, believe it or not, on a jet ski. Imagine that.
No, I don't want to imagine that. That's way too long.
You would think so, right? They do tell you you have to be in good shape to do it. This is not a beginner's trip, right? Start with the little bay excursions first before you work your way up to the Atlantic
How
City.
many hours would that be?
It was a 24-hour trip altogether, but that was round trip. So you went there and then you spent a night there. I think it came with a stay at the hotel, one of the hotels. I think it came with dinner. So the idea was you go jet ski down there, go get washed off or whatever, go do some gambling, go have a dinner, stay overnight, and then the next day you made your way back. It was 24 hours round trip.
So but how long is the actual travel time on the jet ski one way?
Don't know. I would imagine 6 to 8 hours, maybe. I'm not sure.
No, thank you. No, thank you. No, I mean it'd be hard to get me to do an hour on a jet ski.
Right.
I mean,
I did do one of the trips. This is what I say. People laugh. This was one of the most fun times I ever had in my life. I did a jet ski tour with Thai Rock and Glenn DeResto at the time around New York, and we went to New Jersey also.
Really?
It was really, really great. And that was, I think, about a 6-hour trip, but we made a lot of stops, and we also refueled at one point, so we stopped and refueled. So it wasn't like you were just on it the whole time driving.
Okay.
You went around different places. But
Okay.
we went to so from Rockaway, you go under the bridge, then you go into Brooklyn, and then so there's two bridges, right? There's Cross Bay Bridge right there, the Marine Parkway, and then not far after that, you're in Coney Island, right? So now you're really at the ocean, right? So you go from Jamaica Bay to the ocean by Coney Island, and then you go to the Verrazano Bridge. And actually, he had us swimming under the Verrazano Bridge at one point. Now I wouldn't do that because of sharks and that kind of stuff. But
Okay, you were swimming in the water?
yeah. So at a certain point, they were like, if you want, you can stop the jet skis here, get off the jet ski, and then swim under the bridge and just kind of chill over here. Because they said that that's the area where the wake wasn't as strong, right? So you didn't get a lot of waves and stuff like that over there. It was kind of relaxed water. So yeah, it was nice. And you're right by the Belt Parkway. And it was really cool because you saw the traffic on the Belt Parkway, right? And you're on this jet ski or you just got off this jet ski, but you basically have access to the waterways unencumbered, whereas everyone else is struggling in traffic on the Parkway. And it really illustrated how small New York City is. It's much smaller than we think of it. We think of it as this huge place, in large part due to the traffic and the congestion and how difficult it is to get around, right? But when you're on the water, because it really is a city on the water, when you're on the water and you're going to zip by as fast as you can with no traffic, it's not that big of a place. I mean, we went from Queens to Brooklyn very quickly. And then from there, we were by the Statue of Liberty. That famous picture you see of me on my Instagram, right? That was that day, right in front of the Statue of Liberty. And then we went to Jersey City to refuel the jet skis. We got off the jet skis. You got to walk around on the pier, and there's a little store there. There's a bathroom you could use it, kind of get freshened up. They refuel the jet skis for you. You get back on, and you continue the trip. And then we went to Lower Manhattan, and really all around. It was really, really cool to experience a lot of New York City on the water that way. And you can see how connected everything is and how close everything really is.
Yeah, it sounds fun. I might be more inclined to do than a trip to Atlantic City because of the multiple stops.
Right.
The thing with jet skis is I've been on jet ski before, and they look fun and looks great being out in the water, but the ride can be quite violent because especially when you pick up some speed and you start hitting the wake a little bit.
There is a skill to it, and you don't want to go maximum speed.
Right.
Those points, right? Because you'll get jerked around a lot. You feel like you're going to fall off and up and down. Yeah, it is difficult at that time. But yeah, when you get a nice clear path, you kind of fall into that groove. It can be really nice. Get a nice smooth ride. I always wanted to do it. It sounds cool to me to take that trip down to Atlantic City, just along the shore, right? But you do have to stop. I mean, think about it. We had to stop to fill up the tank at one time just around New York City. So now imagine going all the way to South Jersey. I'm sure there are several stops to refuel. Yeah.
I just think something that long, it's like, let's say it's a 6-hour one-way trip. I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to come back. Like, I would just think like, geez, I just did this 6 hours on the jet skiing. Like coming back, I'd be done.
Yeah. I was going to say you could get back a different way, but then what do you do about the jet ski?
I'd be so done. I'd be like, no, I'm done.
You rent a truck and attach the jet ski. I'm going to drive the thing back.
Yeah. Something like that. What's up to James in the chat? He said, when you get off the jet ski to swim, what happens to the jet ski? Do you have to swim back to it? Did it leave you, or did you leave it on the beach and then swim out?
No, we just left it. So he had to stop in an area where there wasn't a lot of wake, right? So it was pretty still. And so we just got off the jet ski, swam a bit, and then swam back to the jet ski. It didn't really go anywhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess if there's a lot of current going on, you wouldn't want to do that because then you got to chase it down. And that's probably not what you want to do.
Right. So that's where he told us, he said, this is a good spot to get off and do some swimming.
Yeah.
I probably have a picture. I don't know if I can find it. I think I have a picture of me actually swimming on the Verrazano Bridge, and you could see the jet ski in the picture just chilling there.
True. Yeah. I probably still wouldn't do it. You know what? The time that I lived in New York, I did not get in the water at all. I refused. I went to the beach, but I refused to get in the water. Just that water has been a shipping port for like 100+ years. Like, I don't know if I trust the cleanliness of the water.
Right. I hear you. Well, you wanted to mention, I don't know, I guess not to spend a whole lot of time on it, but you hit me up about a poll. Was it Crooked Eye who was talking about hip hop, and then there was concern that some people didn't care that there wasn't enough being said about the 50th anniversary. Was that it?
Yeah, well, Crooked Eye was a rapper. Well, we know Crooked Eye. He put up a poll on Twitter. I guess you can call it. Yeah, I'm not calling it that. It's Twitter. He put up a poll on Twitter just asking if people felt some kind of a way that famous rappers haven't really mentioned the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Haven't said anything. And I've seen some other tweets to that effect, especially from some cats who were, in the underground circle or the so-called true hip hop circle, saying that, at least a thank you is in order. Like, you've got some rappers, and they didn't specify whether it was young, whether it was older, but you got people who make their life and their living and their careers and their money off of hip hop and hip hop culture, and don't even mention that this is the 50th anniversary. Don't mention that there's any sort of thing to I don't know, I guess, be grateful for. And so that was what the poll was that he was asking, and the results were that most people said they didn't care.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing to me. So when he says, or when people say this wasn't mentioned, where were they supposed to mention it? On Twitter? I mean, is that? I think rappers?
Here we go. I found it. He said, "How do we feel about the fact that a lot of notable rappers didn't say anything about hip hop's 50th birthday?" And I think he's speaking specifically about the recent the August date from when Kool Herc had the original party. And so, of course, a lot of people were posting happy birthday hip hop and all that. And so from what he's
about posts here, right? When we talk about not saying anything, this song necessarily, they're saying even like on Twitter.
Right.
I mean, isn't that kind of crazy, right? Like, we're judging rappers by what they're tweeting now.
Well, it's a public statement. I mean,
right.
Regardless of what the medium is, it's still a public statement. So if you're a famous rapper or a notable rapper out, at least a happy birthday to hip hop, someone would, on August 11th would, some people will be looking for that, especially in
that much attention to what rappers are writing on social media, or anyone is writing on social media. Like, I get it. It's fun to follow people you like on social media, but are we keeping tabs on what everyone is saying and then doing on social media now? Like, is that the world that we're in? That sounds a bit excessive to me.
Not if you're looking at it from a point of view of like, where we take an important view of the culture and value of hip hop and the culture, and you think, why didn't you at least say happy birthday? Why didn't you put out a statement? This is how you make your living. This is what's feeding your family. This is what's giving you the notability that you have. Like, so I get that point. So his poll had like 52% said who cares and 48% said not cool. So
I'm out of the who cares category, really. I mean, it's social media. I think Twitter is fun. Facebook, I mean, these things are fun for artists or celebrities or any of us to go on there and share our thoughts. I don't think we should be critical of a rapper or anyone for not saying something we want them to say on social media. I mean, what if they're just busy? What if they're in the I'd rather than be in the studio making a dope record. I'm a lawyer. Do I have to tweet everything that goes on in law? I mean, can I just be arguing cases and setting precedent? I mean, to me, that's more important.
I think that's different, though. We're talking about this culture. We're talking about something that a lot of people hold very, very dear. And that's, I think it's part of the divide with part of the generational divide, because and I'm not saying that he's specifically talking about certain generations of people. That could be anyone. Right. But I think part of that is we know that I'd say we'd say probably from the 2000s and back, when you get into hip hop and that golden age and then the old school, there are people who look at hip hop much more seriously than others because they came up in a time when there was no hip hop, and hip hop was a savior, whereas you got people who are in hip hop now who grew up in a time when there always was hip hop. And so it doesn't necessarily, even though it's maybe important to them, it has a different type of importance, a different level of importance to them because it was always there.
Right. But that generational divide is interesting in another way as well, because you would think that the older generation wouldn't care as much about what somebody tweets, right?
No, you would think
the new generation maybe cares more about. They put more value on social media. But if you're an old head, you're like, man, make a dope record. Who cares what I don't have time to look at your tweets all day. I'm busy myself. Like, do I got to keep tabs on what rappers are saying on social media now?
I would think it's the opposite. Like, I would think it's the opposite, that the younger generation would care less because tweets are just so common. Whereas the older generation, they take it more. They would take the idea of hip hop birthday more seriously.
Yes, but of Twitter though, of tweets in general, you think?
Well, it doesn't have to be tweets. He's just saying that didn't mention it. Period. It could be a tweet. It could be a statement.
Right. Where would they mention? That's what I'm saying. Like when we grew up, where would a rapper really make a statement aside from in their music?
Yeah, there could be music. They could have dropped some music. They could have dropped, social media is that platform, whether we want to look at it like it's a trivial thing or not. It is that statement platform, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, whether it's, whatever your feed is. It could be a statement to a journalist. It could be a post on your website or something like. And is
that what our expectations really are now, though?
I think that's what the poll is kind of alluding to. Are we expecting that to happen? Do we think, people should at least show some sort of deference to hip hop and to the culture that they're a part of and that puts food on their plates?
Well, and also by failing to issue a statement on the 50th birthday, is that indicative of them not being grateful or not appreciative of the culture?
That's kind of debatable, but I think is a want. There's a want in certain parts of the culture that there be a certain level of unity and reverence for the culture, that it's not just a music, right? And I think, we come from that era where it's looked at a little bit differently than it might be looked at today. And again, I just want to reiterate, his poll says nothing about the generations. So it could be some older heads that he's alluding to. It could be some younger people that he's alluding to. But, there's a big, strong contingent in hip hop that looks at hip hop as this, this great savior and life-changing thing that happened.
Well, speaking of life-changing things, here you see on the screen, I found the picture. That's the Verrazano Bridge in the background. I'm off the jet ski and it looks like I'm swimming backwards. But at the time, it might not have been at this very moment, but we did go right under the bridge and I swam under the bridge as well.
Nice. It's actually a nice view.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying earlier. You could see, not in this picture, but right outside the picture, the Belt Parkway, and the car stuck in traffic. And here I am loving life in the water with nothing in my way.
Right. Absolutely. So did the water get in your mouth is the question.
Yeah. Well, more so on a jet ski. It does a bit.
Yuck. But James did bring up in the chat, he said, I don't think sharks and whales and dolphins would be in Rockaway if the water was dirty. So maybe that's some kind of consolation.
Yeah. By the way, we were talking last week about why they might be there more closer to the shore, at least, right?
Humans are delicious. That's probably what it is.
And we brought up the idea that's out there that COVID might have had something to do with that, because when everything was shut down, people weren't going to the beach as much, and there wasn't as much boat activity, and people weren't all up in the beaches and in the water as much, and that might have encouraged, the marine wildlife to come closer. Well, There's another theory that I had heard recently, which was climate change, and they said because the water is warmer now, you're seeing more of that. So it could be. Yeah,
that's definitely a possibility as well. So.
Yeah. So in any event, we don't want to be bitten.
No, we don't.
or New Yorkers, right? We said New Yorkers are more likely to bite you than whatever it is. We don't want, unless it's consensual. No, no biting, please.
Hey, I'm not king shaming anybody. Do what you're interested in, as long as it's legal.
So, well, I was going to say, speaking of legal, the law did change when it comes to police misconduct and use of force records. And we actually have data on that now because the New York Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit to foil. I guess they issued a FOIL request, which wasn't answered immediately. And so they filed a lawsuit to compel these records to be turned over. And they've subsequently made them public. So you can go online now. We'll put the links in the chat. There are 2 links. You can go online and you can look at the officer use of force database between 2000 and 2020 and the officer discipline database between 2000 and 2020. And there are interesting stats that have come out of this as compiled by the New York Civil Liberties Union.
Now, this data wasn't previously made or wasn't previously public or wasn't previously easily accessible, even if it was public information.
Right, but there was an effort a couple of years ago to change the law. It was Civil Rights Law 50A in New York State. And that kept police officers' disciplinary records private. The law was repealed. There was a big movement to repeal the law, and it was repealed. And so that enabled these records to become publicly available. And now, thanks to the efforts of the NYCLU, they're online. They posted the records online for anyone to access.
Personally, I think they should be publicly accessible. My opinion on people in certain positions and holding certain responsibilities, that they should be held to a higher standard. And if police are guilty of misconduct, the public has the right to know about it. And I personally think there's much less of a margin of error for a police officer than for, I don't know, say, someone working at Chipotle or something. I think there's a big responsibility they hold on their shoulders. It's not just a job. And so the public should know who's on their streets and what kind of disciplinary action that they've faced and what they've been accused of. I think it's...
Now, even if the accusations were found to be unfounded, do you think that it should be made public that there was an accusation? Or if their name was cleared, should the accusation then not be public?
Off the top of my head, I would lean towards we should still hear the accusation, because I'm quite cynical in the fact that the police are policing themselves. And so they could and have dismissed certain allegations for their own benefit. That blue wall of silence, so to speak. And even these results we saw in there, what was it? A major portion of these things the police got away with just slaps on the wrist.
Right. Do you think, though, that may create room for false accusations? Maybe it would encourage false accusations for the purpose of publicly shaming an officer, even if there's nothing warranted there?
Absolutely. I do. I absolutely think, I think that's an absolute possibility. Yeah. And one thing that does concern me, even though I do think these types of records should be public, one thing that concerns me would be also the officer's safety. If their names are out there like that, that does concern me. So I think there should be some kind of a way to determine a way to keep the officers' privacy and keep them safe, but also to inform the public of what's happening. Right.
I'm trying to find that balance.
Yeah. And I think
that's why we call this nuance, right? I mean, all these issues, I think, have points to make on both sides, considerations that are probably valid on both sides, but you have to try to find the appropriate balance between them. That makes sense. It kind of takes all these considerations into account.
Right. I mean, because no one, we don't want the police to the officers themselves to deal with any sort of retaliation in private life or any that type of thing. We want them to be able to serve and carry out their duties, but also we don't want them to violate the rights of the citizens and crossing the line and breaking that trust and responsibility. So there definitely needs to be some kind of a balance there. And maybe it can just be, instead of like a full name and whatnot, maybe just what's on the badge, the first initial and then the last name, so to speak, or just the badge number and then the information that it was.
Right. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm also on the side of more data being public, being a good thing, and these records being publicly available. But it is a little striking now looking at the list and seeing the names of the officers kind of put on blast here, when this is really a systemic issue more than as an individual officer issue. Of course, we want to weed out people who are not doing good, but the problem really, I think, is a top-down problem, right? In terms of trying to address it. It's a systemic thing. It is a little jarring to just look at these names that you see on the screen here. I mean,
right,
I don't know if this is helping the systemic issue. Maybe it's chipping away at it, right? But I don't know.
And I agree with that. And I think that's one thing that's not often discussed when people are talking about police misconduct. The systemic issue is brought up, but I don't think it's given as much focus as it should be, where the officers are taking the brunt of it individually, when, like you said, a lot of this stuff is a top-down type of issue.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that before. We've even spoken with individual police officers that have said, that they prefer things a different way, but they feared certain retaliations from within, from either speaking up or from doing things of this nature. And so this kind of makes the police officers a scapegoat in a way, and shields the actual systemic issues. But at the same time, it also can be seen as holding the system accountable for disciplining these actions when they're taking place.
Right.
And highlighting, if there's so many officers doing this sort of thing, okay, maybe we need to look deeper. That's
where I think you get the value, and that's where the NYCLU stepped in, because on their sites here, and we can put the links in the chat.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So they did some analysis on the data, and I think that's a really good way to look at the system, right? The systemic, because now you're not just looking at names on a sheet, you're looking at the overall picture of this. And they're saying only 7% of the nearly 2,300 misconduct investigations on use of force incidents were founded by the New York State Police Department's Internal Investigations Division, meaning it determined misconduct occurred. Now, it's hard to really know what that means, right? Because 7% were found. In other words, they're saying that 93% of these allegations were essentially false allegations, or didn't warrant any kind of action. But you don't know, though, now, were they really false accusations, or was there a cover-up, or to what extent?
Exactly.
Valid accusations. We don't know by looking at these numbers.
Right. And if they're determining what was valid or not, that can be an issue itself because of systemic issues itself, or that blue wall of silence, or whatever it is.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, the key term there is internal investigations. And it's funny, I was just having a conversation with someone in a slightly different but related context. As an attorney, I'm often asked to help out with many nonprofits throughout the area, right? And sometimes they'll ask me to sit on the board of a nonprofit and also give legal advice as the attorney. I tell them I really can't give legal advice about what the board is doing if I'm on the board, because then it's like I'm policing myself in a sense. I can't be like, well, I did an investigation and I found that the board took an appropriate action. Yeah, I am the board. I'm on the board.
Right.
So it doesn't work. Right. And so for me to be an attorney, I have to be on the outside of it. I can't be on the board. I can give advice as an outsider. So what this is an internal investigation, meaning people who are within the police department,
right,
in a sense, right? They're investigating fellow officers. And yeah, I mean, in the law, that's considered a conflict of interest, right? So why shouldn't it be here?
Right. Absolutely. And so I think that's, that's one reason why that it should be made public among multiple other reasons that we've also already named. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. But again, we need to make sure that there is a balance so that we're not scapegoating just one aspect of the system.
Right. So,
because for every
here's something that's interesting though. So the first stat that I just gave you, 7% of the nearly 2,300 misconduct investigations on use of force incidents were founded. But here's something very striking in contrast, right? Go down 2 more bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 18,233 alleged acts of misconduct, nearly 7,500 were founded by the police department. So that's not 7%. That's closer to 50%, right? I mean, was that 40 something? There's no number on it. We can get a number on that here. That's a big difference.
That's 41%.
41%. So it seems like when it comes to the use of force, they're saying 93% of the time it was warranted in terms of the, it's more than that, but in terms of the accusations, right? They're saying 93% of the accusations were not founded, according to them. But when it comes to just general misconduct, they're saying 40+% was founded, right? Accusations were correctly made 41% of the time. That's a big number.
Now, the question that I asked, though, in that regard is that use of force accusation, could those accusations have been reduced to misconduct? And that's why the higher number is there, and they're pulling it off of the use of force. So if the officer is charged with or accused of use of force, the internal investigation is like, okay, we don't want to add this to our stats. We're going to find that there's some misconduct here, but not a use of force type of issue. And so now it changes the statistic on it a little bit. Protecting
them, do that, so because they're saying it's a use of force incident. I think anytime an officer uses force of any kind, it should go in that category.
Well, you would hope.
Yeah. You don't know how they're trying to finagle it. I
mean, we've seen, how many, what was the Eric Gardner? They initially thought that was fine, what the officer did.
Right.
And so I think making it public can kind of gives that transparency to the public, and maybe offers a little bit more of,
accountability, transparency.
Yeah, something to the public that these things are being taken seriously, that the discipline is being handled the way that it should be, that things aren't being covered up, which is, I think that kind of attributes to not having it, kind of attributes to that lack of trust between the public and the police. And we need that trust. Like the officers need it for their safety and for the ability to do their jobs. The society needs it for the ability to have a safe society. And people need it for the ability to feel safe while being out and about. They have that trust is paramount to the whole system working. So I think this could be helpful in that regard.
They're saying only 5% of the nearly 500 investigations that referenced racial or religious discrimination were founded. So
I don't know how much of that I believe, but yeah, I saw the other one. Over half of the officers named in founded misconduct investigations were giving no more than a slap on the wrist.
Right. Founded misconduct investigations. So again, these are investigations where they themselves are concluding that the allegation was warranted. This isn't some bogus false accusation. They are saying it's founded. It's
right.
Merit. Right.
And I think that's quite telling if they're like, okay, yeah, there's merit here, but we're just going to give you a slap on the wrist. That I think.
Yeah. But also, I guess it depends on what the misconduct allegedly was.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
How egregious it is.
Right.
Technically, I guess it could be something that we might consider minor, but it would fall under misconduct.
Right.
29% were given a more serious penalty, like loss of vacation days or suspension without pay. I mean, I don't know if a loss of vacation day is a very serious penalty. That sounds like a slap on the wrist.
Yeah. Although, unless you consider vacation days, I mean, this is kind of like what suspension without pay. So if you lose your vacation days, that's also money that you don't get. Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, paid vacation days is basically money in your pocket without putting it in your pocket. So it's kind of a fine in that regard.
Right. But if they're saying that over half Only got a slap on the wrist. What is a slap on the wrist? Just like a piece of paper saying don't do it again, I guess.
Probably like some sort of a write-up, a demerit, so to speak.
I'm gonna write you. I'm gonna report you.
Yeah. You don't get a gold star today.
Yeah, you don't get a sticker on your binder.
Yeah.
10% were placed on probation, 2% were terminated. That actually does sound like a bigger number than you would think, although it probably should be even higher. 2%. 2% of the officers who were in founded misconduct investigations were terminated. Okay, so they are terminating people here.
And
5%
did
not receive any discipline.
Yes, that means it had to be so egregious that the system couldn't make an excuse for it. You gotta go, buddy. Sorry, you gotta go.
Right. So they're saying, we could do some math on this too, right? They're saying 18,000 total alleged acts of misconduct, alleged. But they're saying 2%. Oh yeah, but how many of them were founded, right? I guess that's the question. So 7,500, that's what you got to do. So 2% of 7,500.
Right.
What is that, 150?
Yeah, it's 150.
150. So 150 officers were terminated, apparently.
And I think when we're addressing the larger issue, the larger systemic issue would be these officers, these 150 that were terminated, in a lot of cases, go to other departments, go to other police forces and pick up law enforcement jobs. And I think that's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. They shouldn't. If you're terminated from a police force, you should not be able to get on another police force, especially if it's for some kind of misconduct.
Investigations of alleged misconduct that appear to involve civilians were founded at significantly lower rates than investigations of internal violations of department policy. So that's interesting. They're more likely to find that there was misconduct when it relates to other officers or something happening internally than when it's directed towards civilians.
Right.
I wonder if that's because police officers are the ones complaining.
And I think there, and I'm sure there is, but there probably should also be a way for police officers to report fellow officers in an anonymous way, so that they don't face any sort of
civilians are involved.
In any case, like
because they're saying investigations of internal violations are founded at higher rates, and so I'm wondering if these are mostly police officers complaining because they're saying it's an investigation of an internal violation.
Right.
Maybe they're complaining about their fellow coworkers.
This is quite crazy, though. Like you said, this list of
the names.
Yeah. Number of founded investigations that named the officer. This Brandon Voss, 30 founded investigations.
It looks like this is sorted by that, right?
Yeah.
Sorted by number of founded investigations. So he's the biggest culprit, it seems, in terms of.
He got probation. He got suspension without pay. He didn't lose any vacation days. He wasn't terminated, and he wasn't reduced in rank.
Now, again, we don't know what these alleged incidents are. It could be 30 of something relatively innocuous, and then maybe you have someone who's like only one accusation, but it's something terrible. We don't know. Right.
Absolutely. And in this record, it says 30 is the number of founded investigations that named him, but 3 are the number of unique incidents with at least one founded investigation.
Right.
So that doesn't mean he was involved in so many different things.
Right.
It's basically 3 unique ones with a lot, I guess, different points within it.
I guess you could sort this then also by who is terminated, right? You can click on, you should be.
Sure, you can download this and put it into an Excel sheet or what have you.
No, but you could also sort it right here on the website. So like,
can you? Oh yeah, you can. Yeah.
Now you'll see the officers who actually were terminated. It'll show them as well.
Yeah.
And look, from what I'm seeing, I'm just seeing one incident on most of these.
Yeah.
Right. Some of them have a couple, but
I think people should
only have one.
I think people should check it out. I put the links in the chat that people can check out and see this data for themselves and go through it.
There's another one we can look at. The other link, did you put that in the chat as well?
Yeah, I put both of them.
Okay.
The use of force data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got nearly 50 officers were named in 10 or more use of force incidents, and 393 officers were named in 5 or more.
What I like about the data here is that not only it gives the names, but it breaks down the incidents, pepper spray, taser, firearm use, brandish the firearm.
Type of force, yeah.
Yeah, so I like that. I like that here. Yeah. This guy was named in 13 incidents and pulled his pepper spray 11 times.
Huh.
Like, it seems like pepper spray is his go-to.
But you also have to think, okay, maybe this person, I mean, he's working in a certain precinct, let's say. Maybe
that's absolutely possible.
Population, the same people, right? The same type of incident that warrants that type of response. You don't know.
That's absolutely true. I mean, there's an officer here who have a number of incidents, 18 incidents, pepper spray, out of that pepper spray 2 times, but brandished a firearm between 2018 and 2020 is 14. So out of that 18, he pulled his gun out 14 times. So,
and then there's 2 that are unaccounted for. So that's just what, physical force?
It could be, yeah. So it's definitely interesting data that I think is needed and should be gone through by independent bodies as is possible with this data.
Look at this. Officers use tasers in 2/3 of the use of force incidents that occur during a welfare check. So 2/3 of the time, they're going to use a taser, it seems, if they're using any force at all, apparently, during welfare check. That's
yeah. I think they're used too much. Tasers are used too often.
Yes, 10% of use of force incidents occur during a mental health response. And see, I'm wondering if that's what's going on here, right? Someone is maybe out of control, didn't take their medication, whatever it is. They need to be restrained. Maybe they're causing domestic issues. Police get called, and then they don't know how to hold that person back, how to keep that person in check, and then the tasers come out.
Yeah, I think I can allow for that as well. But I also look at these officers are supposed to be highly trained and have a number of ways to subdue people that are out of control, especially when they have overwhelming numbers with them.
Right. I'm not justifying them.
No, I'm not saying, I'm saying, we should look at that as well. But I think it's a lot of
it's something to look at, and they may know that 2/3 of the use of force incidents during welfare checks occur with tasers coming out. So
yeah, I think what we've got, in my opinion, what we've got is they've gotten too law enforcement have gotten too comfortable with tasers being a means to take someone down immediately and not having to go through de-escalation or having to actually either get your hands into it or having to talk to someone. It's just like, comply or I'm going to brandish this. And I mean, that is also a top-down issue, a systemic issue, right. That
I think we would prefer the taser being used than the gun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's kind of what some might look at it as, right? Like, oh, well, at least I didn't pull my gun. Well, yeah, but we didn't want you to pull the taser either. Like chill out a little bit, dude. Like, come on. So yeah, the thing is, with all of this data, there should be, it should be something that is used to point to making the system better overall.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's really part of who we are as a country, who we're supposed to be, right? And we talk about the First Amendment, why we value speech. And we always would say, well, the cure for bad speech is more speech. Let's just shine more sunlight on it. Of course, things aren't always as smooth, as suave, as RICO as we want them to be. Right. But the idea is you shine more light on something, you provide more transparency. It will eventually get us to a better place because now we have more data to work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know, or we can point to where the weaknesses in the system and try to make it better, which is what we should be doing. And that's better for everyone. That's better for the public. It's better for the officers on the ground. Right. It's better for the system to work, So,
poll question of the week is, do you believe it's important for officer misconduct data and use of force data to be publicly available.
Yeah, I know what my vote is on that. So
we'll see what the people say. We are interested in hearing what everyone out there has to say. I know we put out a poll last week and we have some data and some interesting comments, right?
Yeah. So the poll last week was about the congestion pricing. And so the poll was, are increased toll prices going to make you personally drive less? Because we've seen with the congestion pricing that some of these fees are going to go up. But some are saying $23 for rush hour trip, $17 in off-peak hour trips. And in some estimates that this congestion pricing plan will increase commuters' expenses by $5,000 to $6,000 per year. So that's not insignificant at all, especially in a city that, as we learned previously in a poll, showed that 50% are unable to meet their basic needs.
Absolutely.
So in this poll, we had 30% said yes, that it was going to make them drive less, and 70% said no.
Okay.
So
that's significant, right? Because of those 70%, you don't know how many really don't have a choice or feel like they don't have a choice.
Right. So we had a bunch of different, and I think that was part of it. Some people said, one person said, if the toll increases aren't making people decide to drive less in NYC, they haven't increased the tolls enough. That sucks. That brings a whole nother discussion in. Then it means only rich people would be able to afford to go around the city that they live in.
Right. And I think there's that disconnect that we've mentioned, I think, pretty often on here, that ideally, it would be great if we could all just take public transit everywhere, but we can't because our public transit system isn't where it needs to be. And so you can't have this conversation strictly about, well, let's make it harder for people to drive, because then what? You also have to include giving us better train service, better buses, better network. That's not being talked about, though, enough in this discussion. It's only about the tolls and punishing drivers. But what is the alternative? Where is it? Right? Again, we've mentioned this. You showed us the stick. Where's the carrot?
Absolutely. Come on, give us the answer, RICO. So another response here was someone who lived in New York saying only a masochist would drive in Manhattan if they didn't absolutely have to. And yet there is traffic. Now, of course, it used to be yellow cabs primarily. Now you see mostly Uber drivers. If you go into Manhattan, you'll see the TC plates. So you know that they're Ubers or Lyfts or what have you. But there is still a lot of traffic in Manhattan. And why is that? Is everyone a masochist? Do people feel like they have no choice? I mean, what's going on there? His opinion comes from, he used to be a cab driver in New York City.
So he's suffering from PTSD.
He probably is. So there've been some pretty good discussion in the comments here. People are basically talking about the traffic in Manhattan, and basically, I guess, how it's always been pretty congested. Someone's talking about back in 1972 and the 1960s. Basically, I guess no one wants to drive in Manhattan.
Yeah, you know what? I always heard that myself growing up. I personally never minded driving in Manhattan. It was parking in Manhattan that I didn't like, because it's so hard to find a parking spot. And if you put it in a garage, the prices are astronomical. We all know that game. But driving in it, I don't know. I like driving. It never really bothered me. You get more traffic on the Bell Parkway. I mean, driving in Manhattan is not that big of a deal.
Now, one comment here kind of, I guess, is in favor more of or sees the rail system as a better option. He says there's a metric crap ton of rail service in NYC, and the 5 boroughs are blanketed with subway service. The idea that one simply must drive into Manhattan seems, in most cases, rather bonkers. How many people truly need to do that?
People do. I mean, forget about Manhattan for a second. What about intra-borough travel? What about getting around Queens?
Right.
But then there's also the idea, okay, you're going from South Queens, let's say, to Manhattan. I think you said this last week or whenever we last mentioned it. The mass transit system in the city was really designed to get you into Manhattan and really into Manhattan specifically, right? And even trying to take a direct route from South Queens to Midtown, you got to go through Brooklyn, you got to get through downtown, you got to go all the way up. I mean, that's not a good look. That's not a direct route, and that's not efficient, right? And so Yeah, I mean, you could look at Midtown Manhattan. You could look at certain routes and say that the infrastructure is there. But overall, I mean, you start looking at the outer boroughs and a lot of parts of the city, we're really not as connected as we need to be.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's another one here that has a good point. It said tolls are one of the most regressive taxes out there, since for the poor people, they are a much bigger chunk of their income, but also since poorer people are more likely to have to live further away from urban work because of housing affordability. So it's a good point. It impacts the poor folks more than anyone else.
Right, right. Yeah, and if you are privileged enough and doing well enough to live in great built up, developed parts of Manhattan, great. You probably don't need a car, right? Even though you can maybe you can afford one more than some other folks, you don't need it because you've got all the subway lines you can think of, all the bus service that you need. You know, you're good. You can probably walk to where you need to go. A lot of people who live in those urban centers in Manhattan say, you know, this is a joke. Like, you know, you live downtown. I would never go up past 14th Street because everything that they need is right in front of them downtown Manhattan, or, you know, certain areas. But when you go, again, look at Howard Beach, look at the Rockaways, look at certain places, right? Staten Island, parts of Brooklyn. But a lot of the city, you know, isn't just downtown Manhattan or midtown Manhattan or downtown Brooklyn or Bed-Stuy or where these gentrified areas are.
Right.
I think a lot of people only consider New York that because that's their experience. That's all that they know.
Right.
But the city is much bigger than that. And everyone else is being left out.
Right. Absolutely. And so this also, someone also brought up in here on the point, I'm not going to read it, it's kind of a longer comment, but he brought up the point that basically, I guess people don't realize that the rest of the boroughs, you basically have to go through Manhattan to leave New York City. If you're in Queens, if you're in Brooklyn, if you're in Long Island, you can't leave New York unless you go through Manhattan and incur these types of tolls.
You mean on mass transit?
If you're driving.
Well, no, you can take the Verrazano Bridge.
Yeah, but you still got to go through. You still got to take a toll to go through.
Oh, toll.
Yeah,
sure, absolutely. I think you have to go through Manhattan.
For a lot of things, you need to drive through to go. Like if you're, where's this comment here? You need to drive through Manhattan and incur the increased pricing, but you'll need to drive through Bronx or Staten and pay the toll both ways. Staten Island and Jersey tolls are one way. It goes on about all the different tolls here, but it's an integral part of travel in and out of New York City.
That's a good point too, right? If you're going to leave New York City. Yeah. I mean, so I'm taking a trip to Virginia. Do I have to take Amtrak? That's very expensive too. I mean, you're probably going to drive if you're going long distance.
If you can. Some people, if they can, yeah. So
and there's obviously a lot of gas money, but also high tolls.
Right. And one thing we didn't bring up, and when we were talking about this before, and as I was looking through some other articles here, they brought up that I guess one of the criticisms was like this toll pricing, this congestion pricing was one of the things it was billed to do was to deal with climate change, to bring down the congestion in Manhattan, to bring down the traffic. But apparently there was, the MTA cut something. What is it? I forget what it was. They cut something about a year or two ago that actually increased traffic in Manhattan by 15%. So like this seems like it's more of a money grab than it is an actual earnest effort to fight climate change. Right. And I have to look up what it is.
When you look at the fact that they're not replacing it with better options.
Right. I'll have to look up what that was to.
Okay. I will say this by the way of good news, the city ticket program finally was extended to Far Rockaway. We talked about that. We worked on this for many years. It's finally going into effect now, where you can get that discounted program. And it was expanded beyond just the weekend, right? It used to be the weekend, and then it was off-peak travel, and now it's going to be available at all times. So you can take the city ticket program for a discounted rate from Far Rockaway to other destinations in New York City. It used to be, well, because the train went through Nassau County, it doesn't count, and everyone in Rockaway got left behind even more than they already were. At least that was fixed. Of course, one step, much more needs to be done, but that is positive progress.
It's good.
Yeah.
Progress may be slow, but as long as you got some, that's always a good sign.
That's all you could do. Keep up the good fight. So it's always going to be something, but as long as you're moving in a better direction, you're on the right path. So
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, curious to see what people think out there about this.
I'd like to know what RICO thinks about all of this.
Yeah. Well, RICO, if you're listening, let us know. Is congestion pricing a suave idea in your estimation?
Yeah.
So, all right. Do we have any other topics to cover here?
I think we're good. I think we got through them. I mean, there is the minor news footnote of Donald Trump being indicted again.
Well, RICO might have something to say about that. I actually got an interesting text earlier. Let's see if I can find it here, about our good friend Rudy.
Yeah.
He said, well, everyone, this is Andre, who's been on the show talking about the indictments before. He said, well, everyone is focusing on Trump's fourth indictment. No one seems to be talking about the irony that Giuliani is part of a RICO indictment now as a defendant, because as we know, he used the RICO law very heavily to go after the mob at the time, right? Even before he was mayor, he was Manhattan DA, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah. Now the internets are talking about that. So I think one of the things, and I may not have it completely perfect, but from what I understand, at least from the information that's coming across on the internet, that there's a mandatory sentencing for these things in Georgia, and the governor doesn't have the power to pardon these things there. And of course, it's a state accusation, so the federal government can't pardon them either. So there is mandatory sentencing.
So you're saying even though it's a state crime, the governor could not pardon?
From what I read, in this case, the governor can't. And I could be, like I said, it could be completely false, but from what I read, that was what I saw there.
That's interesting to me. I hadn't heard that, but I do know that the DA in Fulton County, which is where this is emanating from, likes to use the Georgia RICO Act, which is a little bit different from the federal version, right? The federal version, I believe, passed in 1970, signed by Richard Nixon. It was originally done to go after the mob, but it's been used in all different contexts. The Georgia version, which is the state version that they're now indicting under, in this case, is broader than the federal counterpart. And the reason why it's often used is because, in the DA's words, it allows the prosecutor to tell juries the whole story, because it doesn't have to focus just on the narrow elements of the Georgia state criminal offenses, but they can talk about the broader criminal enterprise here, even if actions happen in other states or other things were happening. It's not limited to just elements of a narrow Georgia offense. It could be, this conspiracy happened in other states, and this happened, and these conversations happened over here, and maybe they're not, in the narrow sense of the terms, directly relevant to each individual crime, that's underlying, but they are relevant to the larger, broader criminal enterprise that they're going after with RICO. So it just allows them to tell a broader story and bring in even incidents that happen outside of Georgia. Right.
From this Axios article right now, it's saying, one, since Trump faces state charges in Georgia, the sitting president doesn't have the ability to pardon him.
Right.
And we know that. Now, here's the next point was, in Georgia, the power to pardon is vested under the state constitution to a board of pardons and paroles, which requires that a sentence be completed at least 5 years prior to applying for a pardon.
So that's why. So in Georgia, they're saying the governor really never has the power to pardon unilaterally.
Right. So he'd at least have to serve 5 years if found guilty, and there wouldn't be no way to get him out of it, or any of the people, I guess, that were charged.
That's assuming that a sentence of 5 years or more were imposed.
Right. So, but I think there was I thought there was and again, I could be, something else I had read before said that there was a minimum sentencing for this type of charge in Georgia, but I don't Yeah, I'm not going to say because I don't know for sure, but I know
Right.
it's something that said that there was a minimum.
Listen, it was New York that got the ball rolling on all these indictments, right? And at the time, people were like, "Oh, why are you choosing this one?" That was the first of many, and it seemed like that was what inspired others to get off their asses and get it done too.
Right. Okay. It looks like 5 years is the minimum.
Is the minimum.
Right. So if it's a felony conviction that carries a prison term of 5 to 20 years in Georgia. So it looks like, and yeah, it looks like 5 is the minimum.
But we will see how this all plays out.
Yeah. So, yep.
Thank you to everyone for checking us out. As always, Jay, what is the bottom line?
I think, and we talked about we ended off on some kind of dire things, but I'd like to do the bottom line from how we started, with this idea of, I guess, humanity in a sense, where we talked about the department store here that opened up their parking lot to people that were
Right.
running from the floods, to the owner of Tie Rock and how he welcomed us in, even though we had opposing views. I think if we have more of that in the country, we would definitely be on better footing going forward. And it's something that speaks to who we can be as a people and as a country, and where we should be going.
Yes, very well said. Aspirational.
Yeah.
Again, it's never going to be perfect, but we want to strive to make it as better as we can make it, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah. There it is. More conversation is always a good thing. More transparency, more accountability, more sunlight, right? To tie it all together. I think is good, right? It's hard to work with data that we don't have. I mean, let's get
right.
the data and then go from there. So
absolutely.
Thank you to everyone once again. You can find us on Instagram at Nuance Show. Get involved in the discussions. Of course, we're on Facebook. For those watching live every week, the replays are available on YouTube at Nuance Show. I know we're over 70,000 on YouTube, marching towards 100,000, maybe in a couple months. I don't know, some point in the near future. Hopefully we get to that 100K milestone. So we're looking forward to that. Of course, anywhere podcasts are available, please subscribe and get these shows pushed right to your devices. We appreciate it as always. We've got work to do. We'll catch you next time.